And let me announce the following talk. And the next talk is given by Hans-Gert Gräbe on the interconnection of project and product-centered systems modeling. And Hans-Gert Gräbe is from Germany. Hans-Gert, please, the screen is yours.
First, I have to unmute, then I have to find the correct slide. The correct slide. This is quite interesting. Oh, wait a moment. Once, no. So let's have a look at this here. So does it work?
Yeah.
But it is not the correct. This is the correct one. And I hope if we start this in this way.
Yeah. No,
you see thing? I don't see anything on my slides. Okay, and Mikkel's sum, that is okay. So let's start. How does it work? Was this? Yeah. Let me start with a claim. As far as it is about problem solving, TRIZ is a blackboard technology. Because all 6 fields that you see in that picture here are about models. There is nothing strange about this, since Chetrovitsky emphasizes thinking only happens on the blackboard and with the help of the blackboard. When we have a board, then we have thinking. Without, there is no thinking. In this sense, TRIZ is not about actual management, but about these diagrams, models of organization, management, and leadership in companies and elsewhere. And by doing this, we are doing something that is crucial for human thought. We are imposing our mental schemes of ideal objects onto reality. And Chetrovitsky continues, we have one layer, that of pure thought, schemes on the blackboard, and another layer, that of practical activity. And the transition from the world of practical activity to the world of thinking is very complex and confused, as is the transition from the world of thinking to the world of practical activity. Here is a diagram which adds also the living real world part to this diagram. Most applications of business TRIZ also focus on this work on the blackboard. For example, Dariman with the 4 phases define, select, generate, evaluate in his textbook, Hands-on Systematic Innovation in Business and Management. The process ends with the solution plan. And the implementation is not considered, at least in this book. This is quite justified insofar as this and parts of the analysis phase are strongly domain specific, this specific implementation here. But Howard Smith emphasizes in his articles about PTRIZ, dreaming up a process on the whiteboard is one thing, making it happen quite another. This applies in particular to organizations. As in English, Wikipedia defines an organization as an entity, such a company, an institution, or an association, comprising one or more people and having a particular purpose. And the org ontology says that an organization represents a collection of people organized together into a community or other social, commercial, or political structure. The group has some common purpose or reason for existence, which goes beyond the set of people belonging to it and can act as an agent, the organization. And what is an agent? In the Fauve ontology, it is very clearly defined. An agent are things that do stuff. So there are 2 points here, things that do stuff. So they are working in acting in the real world, and the other is about goals that are common and going to be joined the goals of these people. Czerwinski distinguished between the phases of creating an organization and a living organization. And he's distinguished 3 dimensions of the notion of organization. This is first, organizational work as practical activity. Second, the organization itself as result and means of organizational work. And third, the organization as a form of life of the collective. If we apply this to the question of development of organizations, we see that organizational work is thus directed towards the development of a real-world organizational system. However, such a real-world system is a living system that has both a structural as well as an operational dimension. A system can be structurally disassembled, but as we know, it can be only operated in assembled state. This is a fundamental contradiction of any systemic view. The contradiction between the necessity of decomposing a system for its analysis and its basic indecomposability in operation. And this principle indecomposability does not end at the system's boundary, because the system needs a throughput of material, energy, and information in order to maintain or further develop its own internal structure. This real-world development can itself be represented in blackboard form through comprehensive planning. But the problem is that such planning supports, on the one side, supports control of the real-world processes, but on the other side involves greater effort and thus is in conflict with the goals of efficiency and profitability of the organization. Organizational systemic development is developed by long-term goals of, for example, developing product portfolios and developing companies' short-term capabilities to produce products and services from this portfolio. This interplay of organizational development on different time scales is also expressed in the distinction, usually done distinction between strategic and operational management in a company, and is a source of contradictions between long-term and short-term goals. This is a kind of contradiction that is quite difficult to handle with TRIZ tools. It is a certain kind of contradiction just discussed before, because it affects different system levels in this system operator. One more point. Today, short-term operational activities have greater variability and are often planned and implemented as projects. Additional to representation of planning of projects at the strategic level blackboard, the representation of the implementation of these projects on the blackboard also play a role. To do this, however, it must be understood how project plans, initially a dead body, as noted by Czerwinski, are integrated into the living system of organizational work. The whole thing becomes further complicated when cross-company corporations play a role in such projects, in which the partners each contribute specific competences and possibly pursue their own goals in addition to the common project goal. This means that the strategic plans of different partners overlap in such projects. This type of business activity is on the increase, not only in the IT sector or in manufacturing special machines, but also in many other areas where specific customer-adapted solutions, service-oriented and prosumer approaches play a role. The transition to such customized products is in general trend, which is increasing with the increasing possibilities of digitalization of planning and manufacturing processes. I will describe a use case in this direction. Let me explain the topic on a project that we are pursuing at the moment in Leipzig with two business partners. We successfully applied for funding to develop an app for indoor navigation of visually impaired people. The product idea is to have an app that is a kind of digital assistant of the user that not only supports navigation in buildings, but also organizes the direct connection to different kinds of structured information in the web as time schedules of transport, opening hours, and so on. The app must understand what the user wants and react accordingly. In our requirements analysis, we found that there are three modes to be distinguished: a preparation mode, an orientation mode, and movement mode. Preparation and orientation modes prepare digital information exclusively and directly. For example, planning the road you are going and so on, and looking for different possibilities and so on. In these modes, which primarily remain in the digital universe, the app is the only tool that the user utilizes, the visually impaired user. In the movement mode, the user directly interacts with the real world using other senses and tools as well. He has no visual senses, but he has other senses, of course. He uses special tools as a stock and so on. This is even more noticeable with visually impaired, as they use other tools or common tools, including this app, in a special way. The product itself can be modeled as a BI system. We have an app as one of the components, the user as another component, and their interaction as the interaction in the BI system. Thus, we have to distinguish three systemic contexts: a system with two components, where the component app has to be developed, driven by the requirements of the component user. A big problem is the massive access to the app to external services, whether timetables, opening hours, city maps, speech technologies, localization services, as resources with very special access conditions. So we are faced with three technical challenges. First, the organization of the bidirectional interaction within this product for a specific target group. Second, expanding applications for location-based services. All this, if you look at the opening hours and so, these are location-based services, because for an opening hour, you have to identify what is the object of them. And the third is that GPS is available as outdoor localization service, but there is currently no comparable indoor equivalent. So much about the product. Three partners joined the forces of the project. The partner one, the consortium leader, with experience in app technologies, in particular also already with initial experience in speech technology and the implementation of location-based services. He is interested in expanding this experience. Partner two is leader in BIM technologies. What BIM? BIM is Building Information Management, a new technology for complex building description standards over their full life cycle that has clearly shaped in the last 10 years and is therefore also interesting for indoor location and thus for partner one. And partner three, we, the university team, working group, mainly with methodological experience in requirements engineering, in mixed social methods, in systematic innovation. More or less, we are the scientific junior partner in this consortium. Challenge one in this place here is interesting. We joined this use case since speech technologies are very popular these days and generally interesting for different sorts of digital assistance and human-machine interaction applications far beyond the user group of visually impaired people. Challenge 2 is interesting beyond this use case, since location-based services is a large market, at least for B2B business. But no one knows how to earn money with such services in the B2C market that is addressed with this project. Even so, there are strong political regulatory efforts to enforce the availability of this technology in the concourse of inclusion. And challenge 3 is interesting beyond this use case, since it is a fast emerging new technology standard. Hence, this results in contradictions between short-term and long-term interests of the project partners, as technical experience gained during product development also heavily plays a role, at least for internal motivation. The project context is embedded in 4 supersystems: that of the funding agency and each of the 3 project partners, and is essentially determined by the approved project application. We are faced with the fact that long-term and short-term business goals are in contradiction. The goals formulated in the project application, which must be compatible with the funding conditions, and the strategic goals of focusing on technological progress. This is the central contradiction between the long and short-term goals. Such contradictions are not necessarily already visible during the project planning, but may arise only in the practical implementation of the project. These contradictions must be resolved in the course of the project implementation, at least to show the funding agency that the project was successful. This means that the organization of the living project undergoes clear modifications and clarifications during the project implementation, which at the same time must essentially move within the defined project working program that is more or less fixed with the project application. So this is the form of movement of the mentioned contradictions. The conflicting long-term goals of the partners met in a rough consensus. The rough consensus is formulated as the project proposal, and this rough consensus is the basis and was approved by the funding agency. The project is based on such a rough consensus for the 4 parties on this practical working program, with the biggest contradiction between the funding agency at the one side and the 3 project partners at the other side. Since the funding agency is not very, in its rules, is not very interesting in promoting the project partners developing technological parts, but they should develop a certain market. On the other hand, the financial support of the funding agency as throughput allows the project partners to move forward in further development. The orientation towards a concrete technical application as demanded by the funding agency is definitely helpful, but the question of practical business fields to be occupied on the basis of the project results is open. So the structure of the project is more or less that we have four super systems. These three partners. Each of the partners defines a project team. So the project teams that are more or less independently are working from one from another, at least legally independent, are 3 components within a system. The system is the project context itself, and this project context is related as a supersystem to the funding agency. These relations are quite difficult because the funding agency this project context is defined by a cooperative agreement between the three partners, but the funding agency is not working with this project context, but with the project partners, with each of the project partners. So we have a quite difficult relation between the systems, the components of the systems and the super systems in this case. So the project realization thus follows more or less a very old IETF slogan of rough consensus and running code. The project is set up as a living part of organizational work and in the end delivers running code as well as diverse technological experience of the partners. Such an interplay of small consensual steps with different and also changing partners on a longer strategic path and the adjustment of directions on the basis of experienced results is a proven way to solve the conflicts between long-term blackboard goals and short-term goals. The solution is more lever to develop practical short-term advances towards a long-term goal that is identified at the blackboard. Permanently modify the long-term goal based on the experienced results of the short-term projects, thus processing the contradiction between the short-term and long-term goals. Long-term goals on the blackboard are, in this sense, unfinished thoughts that could be broken down into a rough consensus of short-term goals. This rough consensus makes cooperative action possible and thus practical experience, which in the best case manifests itself in running code, as proven in industrialization. This in turn has an effect on the long-term goals on the blackboard. So let me coin that into a new principle. The principle of unfinished thought. Thoughts can be thought on when times come. Most of them disappear themselves anyway. Thank you very much.
Okay, Hans-Gert, thanks a lot for a very philosophical presentation, I would say. You know, in TRIZ, it has been always a wide gap between the idea and implementation of this idea. Nobody was working on that, and it was placed outside of TRIZ research, how we come up from the idea to the solution, which can be implemented. Also, in your situation, I see that there can be two starting points for future commercial projects. The first starting point happens when all the technologies which are needed to be combined, they are readily available. And second starting point is when some of the technologies which will be needed for combination is an emergent technology and it's not readily available yet. So we start the project and we are looking at the degree of maturity of this emergent technology, and we try to evaluate the time when it becomes ready. So that is, I think that the scenario 2, which I described, is creates the conflict between short-term goals and long-term goals. Am I right?
Several points in this. First, these are quite very interesting thoughts, but these are the thoughts of partner one and not ours.
Okay.
More or less. This is one of the long-term goals. One of the long-term goals is how to cope with these things. And the partner 1 and 2 are in different positions, because the partner 2 is a quite, say, later big, not very big, but later big company with international standing, working on BIM technologies. And he uses this use case with the visual impaired here and so on, and how to cope with the buildings, and so more or less as a use case to test technology that he is just developing, and how and so on. But the thing is here that this partner two is on a big international market, and there on this market is developing a technology, and this technology is, I think, we did not an analysis of this, but I think the partner did. It is an emerging technology, a strongly emerging technology, at least in the last 2 or 3 years. And he is working just on this. But the point is not to sit and wait that there will be a business opportunity, but you have to prepare the technology. You must have a big investment and in due time in this technology to really be with ready to use technologies and the correct technologies, and this that it would be the standards and standard setting and so on. This is more or less the pre-market phase of this technology. I think this is much underestimated in TRIZ, such a pre-market phase, but this is well known in computer science. And if you look at the paper and in the books of component software, and so these pre-market phases are then very famous. And the other one, the first partner, this is a small SME, small enterprise, and he's working more or less on app technologies and such things. And he is really more or less, the question is why he is interested in such a project. He had some experience with inclusion and so on, and he has some standing in this, and he knows how to write a proposal where it's about inclusion, but he really is interested not in visually impaired people or in impaired, but in completely impaired. And the completely impaired is a non-human. They are interested in technologies, in B2B technologies, to localize, to guide, to navigate computer-based things in such environments. And of course, not on the level of autonomous driving of cars. This is much too heavy for small enterprise, but on a very small level. And for example, if you need such in indoor navigation, this plays a quite big role. Yeah? Nowadays they use beacons and other instrumentations of the buildings to really cope this. And the hope is to have with BIM and with disruption technologies some other new possibilities. So both companies, both partners are technology-driven partners, and of course they look for business and for applications and so on. But this is quite difficult business. But they both think that they are at the beginning of the S-curve.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, there is a comment from Hemant Pardikar. I have seen such a product by a startup presented in the show of Shark Tank India by converting visual input of GoPro-like cameras into acoustic inputs.
Okay, we did a small technical research on all this, and the more we made requirements in interviews with visually impaired people. And so we, at least from these interviews, we learned much how these impaired people really work. Yeah? For example, you have such a seeing eye. Also, it was an app. So you can nowadays there are apps that you have a picture, and the app tells you what is on the picture, and you can take a picture with your smartphone, and the app tells you what is on your picture. So more or less, this is a certain kind of additional navigational help. It's not yet integrated in this app or so, but there's much going on there, and the more or less this is this is the point that really this partner one is interested, more or less. But of course, yeah. So there's much on. So this supports the idea that there's really an emerging market, emerging technology, and so on. But you see in this case that there is not one technology that is really emerging, but there is application of many technologies that are applied in a special direction. And this are Bluetooth technologies. These are artificial intelligence. This is image recognition, and so on. And so this is a good bundle of technologies. And this, I think, is also a point to have a focus on technical systems and not on technical functionalities. This is a weak point in TRIZ.
Okay, another question from Anton Kožemyaka. Hans, thanks for your speech about Shchedrovitsky approach. I think it would be very useful to struggle with business problems. I would use Shchedrovitsky approaches in a practical way. It seems quite interesting to use schematization tool described by Shchedrovitsky to previous analysis of business systems. After that, you should apply TRIZ tools to get solutions to the business problem. How you propose to use Shchedrovitsky approach to solving business problems with TRIZ tools? Or your suggestion is using Shchedrovitsky approach as a philosophy of thinking when you cope with a business problem?
We use it more as a philosophy of thinking, or less as one possible approach to philosophy of thinking. And I think Shchedrovitsky is in this quite strong. And my focus is my focus on the very first slide. Is it yet visible here, or
not yet?
What do you see?
Just screen with diagonal lines.
A screen with diagonal lines. Okay, so let's have a look. Maybe hier ist das. Geht ja nicht. Moment.
Yeah. Now it's
oh, I hope you see more.
Now I see it. Yeah.
So this was my point here. My point, the central point, was that in these ideas, this implementation phase is missing, and this was also Valerio also told about this, and I think this is just the point. This is one of the main points. At least I learned from Shchedrovitsky that he really has thinks about this implementation phase also. And if you take schematization is also going back to the blackboard. So, and you can describe on the blackboard many things that are really happening in the implementation area and so on. This is of course correct, but this is not a substitute for really looking at the implementation. And TRIZ is more or less a technology that says, oh, we have a real problem here, let's go this way here, and we have a solution, and the solution is more or less, on the first shot, we have a solution. Other technologies, as for example, design thinking, go this way here. They go this way here, but they make a short prototypical implementation, maybe from paper and so on, really to look at this, to really have this feedback loop here. They are very weak in this direction here, because yes, you can of course use TRIZ tools to strengthen this. Or we used at this case here not design thinking, but we use mixed social methods, because the people in our team are quite good in social methods. But the point is that they work on this feedback loop, and this feedback loop is a little bit missing. Now, you know, of course, in TRIZ, the idea is, oh, we have a system as is, we make a little bit blackboard work and get the system as required, or a system as to be. But the system as to be is different from the system as it became if it is implemented. And after the same here, you have the difference between the system as required and the system as it became. And then you can, of course, you can use the same, you did already an analysis of the system, then you can after the implementation, you can go back to the blackboard, can analyze the problems and anew and say, oh, let's this and change it this way and so on. But this feedback cycle is, in my opinion, more or less missing, little bit missing in this TRIZ technology. And in the question, that's my proposal, in this question of long-term and short-term goals, this rough consensus and running code means that you define short-term goals on a rough consensus, then you implement the short-term goals. And after the implementation, you go back, you have some experience, and from the experience you learn how you go back to the blackboard, and then you can further develop the long-term goal. And this is the kind of the two partners, of the industry partners, that they are really working at this. So they have this project, okay, this we have somehow, it is for them, it is a very difference between the project application and the living project now. This is quite difficult, and I will go not into details with this, but the point is that now each of the three partners has at the one time have a look that to really make this project successful. Successful means it should be accepted by the funding agency. More or less, you have to write a report, and yeah, here we did this here, and this did not happen, and this were the problems, and so on. And the other side, they get experience from this, and they go back to their own blackboard and learn and discuss their long-term goals. More or less, this is the thing. And in this sense, the principle that I proposed is different from other principles used so far in TRIZ.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans-Gert.
Sure.
And the time is over. So Anton, I'm sure you're happy with an answer. Thank you very much, Hans-Gert, once more time.